What if the weight you're losing right now isn't actually fat? Research suggests that a surprising number of people on aggressive diets end up losing more muscle than fat, and most of them don't find out until it's too late, when their metabolism has already slowed down and the scale stops moving no matter what they do. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why that happens and how you may be able to avoid it. Here's a question almost everyone has asked at some point. If fat loss is supposed to be even across the body, why does the belly seem to be the last place it disappears from? And while we're at it, what actually appears to burn fat faster, cardio or strength training? Is training on an empty stomach genuinely more effective? And is there a lower effort approach that could still work steadily over time for people who don't have hours to spend in the gym?
Let's start with the basics. What's actually believed to happen when your body burns fat? When you consistently eat somewhat less than your body uses, or move more than usual, your body is thought to respond by drawing on stored energy reserves, including fat. This is generally described as a hormonal signaling process. Certain hormones appear to instruct fat cells to release stored energy, which then travels through the bloodstream to be used by tissues that need fuel. This is a simplified picture of a genuinely complex metabolic process, but it's the general idea behind what's often called a calorie deficit. One detail people don't always know: when fat is broken down and used, a large portion of it is thought to leave the body as carbon dioxide through your breath, with some water loss through sweat and urine as well. It's a helpful reminder that burning fat isn't just a figure of speech, it's a real chemical process, even if it's often oversimplified in popular explanations. Now, here's something worth being cautious about. This process doesn't always go the way people expect. In some cases, especially under very restrictive dieting, the body may end up breaking down muscle tissue alongside, or even instead of, fat. We'll come back to why that might happen a little later. First, let's talk about that stubborn belly fat question.
Why does belly fat seem so resistant? There's no solid evidence that you can spot-reduce fat from one specific area through targeted exercises alone. That said, research does suggest that different areas of the body may lose fat at different rates, and this seems to be influenced by a combination of genetics, blood flow, and hormone sensitivity in different fat deposits. Some studies point to men often tend to store more visceral fat around the abdomen, while many women tend to store more in the hips and thighs, though this varies a lot between individuals. One proposed explanation involves fat cell receptors. Some fat tissue appears to have a higher density of receptors that are quicker to respond to fat-burning signals, while other areas may have more of a receptor type associated with holding on to fat longer. This is a simplified way of describing ongoing areas of research, and scientists are still working to fully understand these mechanisms. So, does that mean ab workouts are pointless for a flatter stomach? Not exactly. They can help build and tone the muscle underneath, which may improve appearance over time. But the fat covering that muscle is generally used based on your body's overall energy balance, not specifically because you trained that muscle group.
Okay, here's the part most people get wrong, and it might completely change how you think about your workouts. What if the exercise you've been told burns the most fat actually isn't doing that at all, at least not in the moment you're doing it? Let's talk about cardio versus strength training. During cardio, especially higher intensity sessions, your body tends to prioritize quickly available energy, mainly stored carbohydrates, because fat requires more oxygen and more time to break down, and your body doesn't always have the oxygen supply to spare during intense effort. So does that mean cardio doesn't help with fat loss? Not necessarily. Some research suggests that after a cardio session ends, the body may go through a recovery period where it works to restore its energy balance, which can include additional fat use during rest. This is often referred to as the afterburn effect, though its overall contribution to fat loss appears to be modest rather than dramatic, based on current studies. Strength training seems to play a different role. Rather than being the primary driver of fat burning in the moment, it appears to help signal the body to preserve muscle tissue during a calorie deficit. When muscles are regularly used under load, the body seems more likely to protect them. When they're not used, the body may treat them as less essential and more readily broken down for energy. This is one reason many coaches recommend combining both cardio and resistance training rather than relying on just one. Now, about exercising on an empty stomach, sometimes called fasted training. Some research suggests that training in a fasted state, particularly at low to moderate intensity, may shift the body towards using a higher proportion of fat for fuel during that session, likely due to lower insulin and blood sugar levels. However, evidence on whether this leads to greater overall fat loss over time is mixed, and pushing fasted training into high-intensity or heavy lifting territory may lead to reduced performance, dizziness, or fatigue in some people. If you choose to try fasted training, it's often suggested to keep intensity moderate and to listen to how your body responds, and to check with a healthcare provider first if you have any blood sugar concerns.
What about sweat? A common myth is that sweating more means you're burning more fat. In reality, sweat is primarily your body's cooling mechanism, and the weight loss through sweating is mostly water, which typically returns once you rehydrate. It isn't a reliable indicator of fat loss. Here's something important to flag. Some people follow very aggressive calorie restriction and see the number on the scale drop quickly, but notice little to no visible change in body composition, meaning their body shape doesn't change much despite the weight loss. This can sometimes be a sign of losing muscle rather than fat. Severe and prolonged calorie restriction may prompt the body to conserve fat as a protective energy reserve while breaking down muscle tissue instead, especially when combined with a lack of resistance training. If you notice this pattern happening to you, it's worth speaking to a doctor, registered dietitian, or qualified trainer rather than pushing harder on your own. This kind of pattern can carry real health risks if it continues unaddressed. One more detail some people find surprising. Breathing technique may play a small supporting role in supporting oxygen delivery during exercise, since fat metabolism is an oxygen-dependent process. While the effect size isn't something to rely on for dramatic results, some coaches suggest practicing breathing through your nose rather than your mouth where possible, breathing into your belly/diaphragm rather than shallow chest breathing, aiming for slower, fuller breaths rather than quick, shallow ones, emphasizing a complete exhale to help clear carbon dioxide. These are supportive habits, not a substitute for proper training and nutrition.
Diet appears to play a substantial role in supporting these efforts. A few generally supported habits include prioritizing protein intake, which may help support muscle maintenance during a calorie deficit, increasing fiber intake, which may support satiety and digestion, maintaining a modest calorie deficit rather than an extreme one, since very large deficits are more strongly associated with muscle loss. Staying adequately hydrated throughout the day. A common general guideline is somewhere around 2 to 3 liters of water daily, though individual needs vary based on body size, climate, and activity level. Limiting highly processed and sugary foods, since these tend to be calorie-dense and can make maintaining a deficit more difficult. And prioritizing consistent, adequate sleep, commonly cited as somewhere around 7 to 9 hours for most adults, since poor sleep has been linked in research to disrupted hunger hormones and reduced workout recovery. A lower effort alternative. For those who don't have the time or energy for a structured plan like the one above, there's a lower intensity approach that focuses on small, sustainable daily habits rather than intense training blocks. Phase 1 is about adding light movement throughout the day. A short walk after meals, taking calls while walking, choosing stairs over elevators, and doing physical chores like cleaning or light gardening. None of this is meant to be exhausting. It's meant to keep your body gently active throughout the day. Phase 2 focuses on eating habits, slowing down at meals, aiming to stop eating around 80% full, including some protein at each meal, and gradually swapping refined carbs for whole grains where practical. Phase 3 is about prioritizing consistent, quality sleep, keeping your bedroom cool, dark, and free of distractions, and aiming for a consistent sleep schedule.
For those who don't have the time or energy for a structured plan like the one above, there's a lower intensity approach that focuses on small, sustainable daily habits rather than intense training blocks. Phase 1 is about adding light movement throughout the day, a short walk after meals, taking calls while walking, choosing stairs over elevators, and doing physical chores like cleaning or light gardening. None of this is meant to be exhausting. It's meant to keep your body gently active throughout the day. Phase 2 focuses on eating habits, slowing down at meals, aiming to stop eating around 80.
Here's the thing nobody tells you about fat loss. It was never really about finding the one perfect workout or the one magic food to cut out. Based on what current research generally suggests, the biggest factor separating people who keep results long-term from those who bounce back to where they started isn't intensity, it's consistency and the small daily habits that don't feel dramatic at all. If any part of this approach felt manageable to you today, that's usually a good sign it's sustainable enough to actually stick with. As always, this video is for general educational purposes, and it's worth checking with a healthcare professional before making significant changes to your training or diet, especially if you have any existing health conditions. If this helped clear things up, consider subscribing for more breakdowns like this one, and let me know in the comments which parts surprise you the most.